So we're talking about weathering. We're talking about mechanical and chemical weathering. Let's get to it. What is mechanical weathering? Well, mechanical weathering we're talking about here is the breakdown of rock into smaller pieces. So it literally is breaking it down without changing the composition of the rock. Sometimes we call this physical weathering. So it's actually the rock is broken down into pieces by a force, and that force might be a human, it might be an animal, it might be ice. It all depends on what happens with it. But smaller pieces are not carried away. They do not move. That's erosion. Okay. There are three types. There's mechanical, there's chemical, and then there's biological. So like I said, sometimes we call it physical weathering, but you'll hear it both ways. Ice wedging. Ice wedging is the first one we'll talk about. It's a mechanical process. So the water fills the joints of the rocks, and as it freezes, it expands. And as water expands, it makes the crack a little bit bigger. And as it makes it a little bit bigger, more water can get in there once it thaws. It refreezes, makes the crack a little bit bigger, and this thawing, repeated thawing and freeze cycle creates cracks in the rock, and they get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and pretty soon the rock can't handle it anymore, and it just breaks apart. When we're talking about exfoliation, we're talking about the rock is broken off into sheets. So they have like layers to it, and so it's broken off into a nice sheet. This happens because the material that was sitting on top of the rock has been eroded away somehow, and you can see that this one has actually gone down the hill here. So it used to be attached right up here, and these joints right there used to meet. Thermal expansion is when the rock heats up and cools, heats up and cools, heats up and cools. And every time it heats up, it expands. Every time it cools, it contracts. So that constant heating up and cooling causes the rock to split apart. All right? That contraction at different rates, because not all pieces of the rock are all the same. So it contracts at different rates and causes the rock to split. Mechanical and biological. When we're talking about biological, we're talking about weathering because of something living. Remember, biotic means alive. This is weird to write with this, but I'll get through it. So biotic means alive, all right? So when we're talking about alive, we're talking about, well, it could be an animal, it could be a tree or a plant root, it could be a microscopic plant, it could be just about anything. Now, when we're talking about bacteria and lichens and some other organisms, sometimes they'll secrete acidic solution, and that's chemical weathering. Okay, so sometimes we have mechanical biotic, and sometimes we have chemical biotic. It just all depends on actually what the animal or plant is doing to it. Here's lichen causing biological weathering. The pieces of the lichen, the roots and whatnot, are getting inside the little crevices of the rock and breaking it apart. Here you can see right in through here and right in through here, all over the place. Parts of the plant getting in within the rock and breaking it apart. So chemical weathering. Chemical is a reaction that breaks down the rock, actually the bonds of the rock. So pretty much it kind of is dissolving the rock, and when it dissolves the rock has no longer its integrity to hold together, and it just falls apart. The rock can react with water and some gases and solutions. Oxidation is one of those chemical weathering devices. Oxygen will combine with parts of the rock and form a new type of rock. A lot of times it's softer than the original. It's easier to break apart. Rusting happens as well, where iron and inside the rock will rust the rock, and all these contribute to the rock breaking apart or dissolving. Carbonation, and we're not talking the carbonation in your soda. We're talking about carbon dioxide dissolving in water, making a carbonic acid. Now, it's not dangerous to you and I, but it helps dissolve the rock because the rock can't move. It's kind of stuck where it is. So over hundreds or even thousands, maybe even millions of years, the rock tends to break apart. So how is erosion and weathering different? We talked about erosion a little bit in class, but let's talk about how they're different. Weathering involves two processes, whether it's mechanical or chemical, that work together to break down the rock. The idea is that there's no movement in weathering. However, when as soon as we're talking about the rock particle being loosened and moving away, so as soon as it moves, we call it erosion. All right, and that's the difference. So that's it for this quiz. It's fast, and we'll see you in class.